having it all to me originally looked like working mom, traveling around the world, always like perfectly attired, have their shit together 100%, comes home, kisses the kid, and like you could still have that. But now knowing what I know, it's like, okay, that mom makes sacrifices too, right? Like her trade-off is that she's not at home that much with the kids, and that is her choice to make. And I respect that, right? Versus like the mom who has taken a career break, it's like her choice is that she will be at home, but then her trade-off is obviously not having like fulfilling some other part of herself. And so like life is just a series of trade-offs, and the trade-offs that you think are justified versus trade-offs that somebody else thinks are justified is always going to be different. It's as different as personality. And so just you can have everything that you want, but you have to also you have to be willing to accept the trade-offs that get you there, right? So don't get too I just like LinkedIn and Instagram, and it's so unhealthy because it looks like people have it all, but you also have to respect the trade-offs that have gone into getting there. It's like the mom who has, I don't know, a six-pack like 3 weeks after birth or whatever, and you're like, well, do you know what she invested to get there? Like you could have that too if you were willing to make the trade-offs.
Hello and welcome to Make It Work, the bi-weekly podcast where we uncover inspiring stories of modern working mamas in Asia who have redefined their career paths whilst putting family first.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Make It Work. I'm your host, Sarah Wong. Really excited today to have a special guest, Maria Lee. She is the COO of Tech in Asia and a mom of 2 wonderful kids. And she has an amazing story of how she went through her experience as a single expat in Singapore 8 years ago, and finally deciding to make this place her home with her family, and how she's gone through really different stages of her motherhood in the very interesting company of Tech in Asia, from being a startup to now being acquired by Singapore Press Holdings, and all this time having experienced birth, miscarriage, and then a second birth. So she has a very inspiring story of how it has really shaped her, as well as how it affects how she shows up at work. And I'm excited to have Maria share with us today about a really personal story that I don't think she's told many people. So welcome, Maria. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for coming. Why don't you just start us off and tell us about yourself in 2 minutes or less? Sure. So my name is Maria. I'm currently the COO of Tech in Asia. And yes, I am originally American. I've been in Singapore for 8 years. I used to work at Apple. And so actually Apple transferred me over to Singapore 8 years ago. I spent about another year with the company. And then I really believed in Southeast Asia startup ecosystem. So I joined Tech in Asia, which is a digital media platform and events platform for startups and tech across Asia. And so I've been in the COO role for 6.5, almost 7 years now. And yeah, I'm a mom of 2 boys. One is 4 and one is 18 months old. They keep me busy, and I'm deep into that boy mom life. Boy mom life, yeah. Well, take us back to a time in your journey of becoming a mom, maybe before you became a mom, and like how you decided to actually call this place your home. Yeah. I mean, it was a bit of an accident, to be honest. So when my husband and I first moved here, we were, young, recently married, obviously no kids, no baggage. So we literally showed up in Singapore with like 5 suitcases. And we're like, great, this is going to be really fun. We will live abroad for us. We were both in SF before. We will live abroad for like a year or two, get our, travel a bunch, get our kicks in, and then we'll move back to the US when it's time to have kids and like settle down and start adulting properly. But I think that first 2 years, we had a great time. I joined Tech in Asia, and then I realized in my COO role, like I wasn't leaving really anytime soon. Then COVID hit, and then we were like, I don't know what it was about the lockdown, but at some point we were like, we should have kids now. And then so we had our first son, and yeah, the rest is history. And earlier on, you're talking a little bit about how it's so different from what you've observed of your friends in the US versus here. Yeah, talk a little about that. Right. So, of course, I think my mental map of what it meant to be a working mom was very much shaped by, of course, what my mom raised 3 girls, 3 of us, and working the entire time as a professor at a university, researcher. And like it was hard for her. And then watching a lot of my friends in the US also have kids. I thought of parenting or being a working mom to be like a very difficult and or isolating kind of experience. When I moved here and met a few friends who had young children, and obviously in Singapore, not everybody, but a lot of people can have a helper, and like tapping into some of the like local resources that are around some of the neighborhoods and the villages and communities that are here in Singapore
we saw a different side, or I saw a different side of what it meant to be a working mom. So I saw that, like, okay, again, in the US, I feel like being a working mom is really, you're either in two modes. You're either in work mode or you're mom mode, and there's no in between. But I think what happens with a helper, and then like, I mean, there are schools here, but the support here, I think, is just so much more accessible and affordable.
Yeah.
You can have a much more balanced life, right? And so like these days, I think of my life in terms of like, sure, I have the work part of me and then the mom part of me, but then I also think about like time that I spend with my husband, time that I spend with my friends, time that I have to myself. I think in the US, you don't get those latter three categories, which is why maybe the divorce rate is also so high and people are in unhappy marriages because they're always like squabbling over, you know, like who's cooking dinner, who's cleaning the house. Like all these things stack up and they do put stress onto a relationship. And, you know, like, and you're basically trying to keep it together with just like working and mommy, let alone taking care of yourself, seeing friends, spending time with your husband. And I think in Singapore, like, because really, I think it's because of, give a lot of credit to our helper that I feel like I have a much more well-balanced life.
Right.
And obviously the first 2 or 3 are still the biggest categories in my life, but I do have time to myself and I do have time to go out to like dinner with friends on a casual Friday. And it's not planned like 7 months in advance, you know, like, so you get all these different aspects. And like I said, when I saw a different model of what it would be like to be a working parent, I was like, well, why would I leave, right? Like, obviously, this is the best place to do it. And so we've stuck around.
So funny. I feel like you gave a plug for, you know, Singapore.
Dude, I'm like, all American friends, like when American friends come visit, they're like, and they kind of see our setup, they're like, this is amazing. Like, you have hacked it. I'm like, I know. But it's not me, right? It's like, this is just like the environment, the community that we kind of live in, which makes it all possible.
Okay, tell us about this village that you've created for yourself and your family.
Yeah. Okay. Obviously quite unintentional. And so I think there is one group, like we have a neighborhood crew, if you will. So in my condo and then some of the other condos that are like nearby us, there's just a group of helpers and kids that hang out together like every single day after school. And so there's probably like 7, sometimes at the high level, like 10 families involved. I don't know how the aunties do it, to be honest. I think they all have like a giant WhatsApp group. But every day they are coordinating. They are either hanging out at like my function room, one of the other condos function rooms. They're taking the kids off to the park. And then so over time, and because we all live in the same like neighborhood, and then there's also a grocery store, like we just have a very strong local community where like every time we go out, we can say hi to somebody. Like, obviously, all the other helpers are very familiar with my children as well. And so I also feel like there's always eyes on them.
Right.
And then it's great for them to grow up in a world where, you know, like that's so friendly and open. Then they know that like they know their neighbors, which again, I think in the US can be quite isolating, especially if you're living in a suburb. And so I think that's one community that we've kind of developed over the years. And then the second one is really just amongst my own friend group. So I was friends with a group of people well before having kids, but we all ended up having kids at the same time. And so our kids have also grown up together and they're best friends. And there's anyone from like a newborn up to like a 10-year-old. And so it's great to also see the different kids across the different age groups kind of interact. And I think there's a lot of learning and maturity that happens there. And, you know, again, it's just like this extended network of community. We don't have any family here or relatives. So I guess if we did, this would be like the equivalent of playing with their cousins and aunts and uncles, but we don't have that. But as we do like take group trips together, we can like pop our kids over to any of these people's houses and they're happy there. And so it's been such like a warm community. And I feel like, again, I always compare back to the US, but it's like in the US, you basically have your nuclear family, right? And that's kind of who you spend your day-to-day with. And then once in a while, you'll have like holidays with your family or somebody will come visit or whatever. But what's amazing about the community that we built is that it's like a daily, weekly thing, right? Like we see these people so frequently and that level of comfort is really there.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful that you've created a home away from home. Yeah.
And I don't even think, I mean, I don't know, but like in the US, my parents live in one place, my 2 sisters live in different places. And so it's not like if I went back to the US, I would automatically be able to like recreate this kind of community just because I do have my family there.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you found Singapore home. And as someone who's experienced a little bit of the mothering of a, you know, under 2-year-old in the US versus, you know, having my second kid here and another kid on the way. Like the support is unmatched. And I think it's so integral. Like you just don't think about it maybe as a single, but like, yeah, it's something not to be taken for granted. And I mean, even like not just the help that you can like hire, but like the people that you can meet within 2 kilometers of your place, right? You're talking about the grocery auntie, knowing your kid.
Yeah.
Buying a banana.
Yeah. My second kid loves bananas, and he gets into Fair Price and he's like, want a banana? And sometimes my helper didn't bring money. And so the grocery store auntie will just buy him a banana with her own money. And then I'm there, and the next time she like walked past him and she was like, Max, you don't want a banana today? And so like, that's just like, that's amazing. I mean, I do think obviously you can form community anywhere, right? But I think there's something special about Singapore where I feel like it's a little bit easier. Like the barriers to forming that community are a little bit lower.
Yeah.
It's just a lot more accessible.
Right. Now bring us to a time in your journey as a mom that was pretty rough, difficult time for you. How do you get out of it?
So I wrote an essay about this about a year ago, or maybe earlier this year. I don't even remember. But so we had our first kid and he was doing well. And then I got pregnant again and I had a miscarriage, which was tough. I think it was tough because until you have a miscarriage, you don't really realize how common and frequent they are. I mean, I always thought a miscarriage is like, oh, maybe you have a miscarriage before your first kid. But for some reason, because the first one was so smooth, it didn't really occur to me that like I could. Yeah. So it was more of like, it was a mental shock, but an emotional shock, of course. But the other thing that was happening is like at work, I was actually taking the company through our acquisition process. And so I didn't really have that much time to process or grieve in the moment. I mean, I literally remember we went in for what we thought was like a routine checkup. And then, of course, at that moment, we got the news that it had been a miscarriage. But I actually already had investor calls lined up for the rest of the day. And so like it wasn't really an opportunity to like take the rest of the day off, which would have been ideal to kind of process the news with my husband or whatever. And so I just like compartmentalized and then went into the investor call and did my thing. Luckily, my CEO, we're extremely close. Like we've been at this job for forever. And so I actually told him immediately because I kind of walked into the room and he was like, you look a little funny. Like, what's going on? I told him on the spot because, I mean, there's nothing really to hide. And then later, like the week later when I had to take the drugs to pass everything, I told him what was going on. I was like, hey, I need to take Thursday and Friday off. I didn't really tell the team. I just said I had a medical thing. And so that was it was I guess the mental load as well. And it's always true, I think, in any work, but especially in a leadership position, is like, there were so many faces I was playing at that moment, right? It's like the team didn't know about the acquisition. So we were trying to, because we didn't want to we didn't want, I don't know, either people to get excited or like disappointed by it or like whatever. So we kind of wanted to do the emotional management. So the team didn't know about the acquisition. And so I'm like playing one face with the team or like, playing one role with the team. Of course, like presenting one role as we're talking to the investors for the potential acquisition, as I'm processing the miscarriage at the same time. And so like that period of time felt very disjointed, right? Like I felt like I couldn't be 100% authentically myself in any one of the situations. It's not like I was hiding the miscarriage, but I was also like, I was also processing. So yes, that one where I feel best is obviously where, I mean, I'm a very direct person and I usually am who I am. Yeah. And being able to be that person is kind of what has helped me always keep sane. And so in that period, I wasn't really able to. And I found that really, like mentally stressed. Like I found that to be more stressful than almost anything else. Like it wasn't the workload of the acquisition. It wasn't even like the emotional grieving process over the miscarriage. It was really just like not being able to be authentically myself in every single one of these situations.
Oh, yeah. And now that you mentioned, there's just so many different faces or like different moving parts, but you have to have it in place. But you mentioned how you're super close with your CEO, I guess is your boss. And like, I'm sure that's been really helpful through this whole journey.
Yeah. I mean, I am super lucky. He is, he's a dad of 3 girls as well. And he was a parent before I was. And so I think he really understood as I like became a mom for the first and second time, like he really understood the journey I was going through as well. And has been like immensely supportive throughout the entire process. And so like it is the thing that also I think burns working moms out is constantly having to present a different face at work. Yeah. And so, like I said, to the extent that you can be authentically yourself and be at a company that values you for you, as opposed to like faking it one way or the other, I actually think definitely the better you will be at work, but then also like the more at peace you will be. And it makes being a working mom actually easier, as opposed to having to like shove one part aside when you walk in through the doors of the office. And, like I think that is what really stresses people out.
Yeah, let's talk about that, that piece of building a workplace that is authentic and where working moms or even, people of the minorities can feel comfortable.
Yeah.
What was it like in TIA?
I mean, we're very straightforward. We're very direct. I think a lot of companies talk about radical candor, but I think we practice it. I will caveat that to say that, like, we're always actually trying to get more radical candor towards us as well. Because I think, I don't know, like, I do think that maybe, especially working in Asia, the culture is not always that you feel like you can give feedback to your bosses. And I think we've always been trying to overturn that sort of notion and create a very different kind of working environment. But then specifically when it comes to parents, like, we do have a lot of parents. I mean, we have a lot of young parents, right? Like, a lot of people join us when they're in their early-ish 30s, like 20s or whatever, and then they have their first kids while working at Tech in Asia. Same thing for me, same thing for my CEO, same thing for a lot of the leadership team. So we've gone through that transition with this company. Yeah. And so we've also been able to create a company culture that gives room for people to learn how to become working parents. One policy that we've always had is flexible work, even before COVID, before anybody became parent. But it's really like work whenever, wherever you want. We will track you, obviously not based on input and where you are and whatever, but based off of output. And I think if we have an issue in output, then sure, then we'll work backwards. It'd be like, okay, like, why? But the general sense is like, everybody is an adult. And so manage your time and do your work as if you're an adult. And again, that policy has been in place literally since the company was founded. But especially as a working parent, you're like, you don't realize how good that policy is until you become a working parent, basically. And, now it's like, of course, there are core meetings and things like that. But I do make sure that I try to schedule a lot of my meetings around like my kids' pickup. I hop back online after work, and all my team members know that, like, I work after bedtime because that's when I have a quiet moment to do it, but they're not obligated to respond to me at that time. That's just what works for me, right? And so, yeah, so I think that has all gone into I would like to say it's more intentional than it probably is, to be honest. I think it's really just figuring out a workplace that works for us, and then as a result ends up working for a lot of the other working parents as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? Flexible work doesn't just work for, people with young kids, but everyone.
Yeah.
This life happens. And I really like that Tech in Asia sounds like a place that values the output more than the input.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I really wish that more places would be able to do that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your identity as a working, professional after becoming a mom. How did that shift and where are the biggest changes that you've seen?
Yeah, I would say becoming a mom has been good for me at work. It's obviously, many people say this, but it forces like dramatic and extreme reprioritization of your time. Yeah. And it demands extreme efficiency of your time, right? And so I used to be, I still do, you're probably, high functioning and really efficient before this. So like, true. But there were things that I would brute force prior to having kids that I don't brute force anymore, right? So, like I was saying earlier, I used to do one-on-ones with all my direct reports like every single week. And over time, I just realized like that was eating up a huge amount of time in my calendar. And not only was it like not efficient for me, it actually wasn't efficient for comms, because if I have like a one-on-one with one direct report and they're upset about something else, and then I have another one-on-one, it's like I have to have 3 conversations before we can close the triangle. Whereas these days I'm like, no, actually, I do expect y'all to just like directly have the conversation. And so that actually, it's forced efficiency as a result. And then the other thing is like, I definitely have a temper. It's like been my lifelong like bane of my existence. I just have a temper. Like when a few things are not going well and I feel like things are not being efficient and like whatever, I do just get so irritated. And that temper used to come out a lot more at work because like, yeah, things would be not going well for whatever reason. And I'd be like, come on guys, like let's get our shit together. And then these days, also because maybe I've been in the role for long enough, it's like I have mellowed out considerably. When things come up, and they always do, like we run a lot of events, there's always something with events. But it's like when things come up, it's more about like I more move straight into problem solving mode, which is like, okay, like I have no energy to waste on even being annoyed or upset. Like let's just figure out like what went wrong and how we fix it. And so I think it's made me a lot more measured as a person, because I'm also thinking like, okay, like I don't have time to sit here and like do inefficient whatever, like, or like even the energy to be upset about something. Like we just have to move on because I've got bedtime in like 3 hours, or or I've got to go pick up my kid.
Yeah.
And so I actually think it's made me a better leader and better person at work. Yeah, exactly.
So as a woman in leadership, you've spoken about the broken rung in how there is, a gap, right, of women representation in leadership. How do you see this, and how do you address this personally, and I guess as a company?
Yeah. I remember writing that article after my first kid, but before I had my second. And actually, anecdotally, what I remember
Because 1 and 2 is very different.
yes,
right?
exactly. Anecdotally, what I remember is a lot of people, and I think that one in particular was related to the fact that when there are not enough female investors, then there's not enough female founders getting funded, right? Because they just don't understand, and there's like that disconnect. And the thing that worried me when I talked to a lot of my friends at VC funds was that anecdotally, most women left the workforce after their second kid. Because after one kid, especially in Singapore, there's like a ratio of 3 to 1. Usually it's like you, the dad, and the helper. So it's like you can still manage. But it does feel like the load after the second kid picks up considerably, and then the balance isn't quite there. And a lot of women were leaving after their second kid. And I was terrified because I was like, shit, what happens after I have my second kid? Like, will I be able to? And so that is, I think, and to be honest, like the first year after having my second kid was extremely difficult from like a balance perspective. Just, yes, balancing like the timings and the needs and the nap schedules and and all of that was it was so much work for that first year. Obviously, I think I'm over the hump now, but that broken ground, it is both, it's always a two-way street, right? It's like you have to be able to be at a company that can value you, like value as a mom one, mom two, doesn't really matter, but value as a mom and your contributions on a schedule that works for you, which goes back to the flexible work arrangement. So I think there's a lot incumbent on the company that they have to get right as well. And if they don't, then it's to their own detriment because they are losing a significant amount of talent, relatively early on in the career. But then I also think that as a mom, you have to figure out something that works for you, right? And so I would say that what usually happens especially after your second kid, is like every single hour becomes so precious. Once you become a mom, if you're in already a job that you didn't like, the contrast between spending time at home with your kids versus being in a job you don't like is going to be so huge, right? Like, it's like when you don't have kids, you're kind of like, well, what else am I going to do with my time? So it's okay to have a job that I don't like. But once you have a kid, I feel like the bar for what a good job looks like is actually higher. And I think that's what a lot of people have realized. They're like, oh, wait, actually, I didn't really love my job to begin with. And so now the costs are not worth the benefits, right? And I think that, and so it's more of a reckoning process that like, actually you weren't in a job you like, not about just like you and the workload at home, which can be a lot, but actually I think you have higher standards for what makes the cut in terms of being worth your time to be away from the kids, right? And I think that's the thing. So actually a lot of it is incumbent on the company to be the employer, to be a job that people actually like to be working at. But I also think from the mom's perspective, I think you have to be really brutally honest about like, okay, what kind of job does make that cut? Because I do think, and we can talk about this, but like women who take a few years off, 100% respect. I totally get it. But if you want to go back in, my point is like, be really thoughtful. Don't just go back into a job because it's a job. Go back in a job that you actually will enjoy and meets that threshold, which is now higher of like, this time away from my kids and my family is worth it. So I think it's fine to be pickier and choosier, but like, I think just like be really honest about what kind of like what you're looking for and what creates a good job.
Right. No, I love that. Yeah, you're right. I think the opportunity cost really exponentially increases with basically more kids in the picture, and time is such a precious commodity that you become much more choiceful and like intentional about it. And I think, to moms out there who are thinking about it, like, don't feel guilty about that or bad, because I think it's part of the equation, right, of having more children and having the same amount of time. Yeah.
I mean, like, honestly, these days, companies, are dying for good talent, right? And so I think the days, especially in the startup scene and tech scene, it's like the days of like just really easy money and being able to hire whoever have gone away. And so like they have less positions to fill, but they need better people to fill each one of those positions, right? They can't brute force their labor force anymore. And so like, yes, companies should be willing, the right company should be willing to like understand and meet you where you are, but then they are still getting the better end of the deal, in my opinion. To your original question, which is like, I don't sweat it if I see a gap. Like I would, of course, if the resume up until the career break is like, oh, okay, yeah, like interesting companies, interesting roles, showing like clear growth progression or whatever it is. And then there's a career break, like you just ask, right? And so I think the other thing is that I do think women get overly apologetic and very insecure if they've taken a career break. And I think that is also quite unnecessary, because it's kind of like when you have a pimple on your face, like you think everybody sees it, but literally nobody else sees it.
And so if it's on your resume and you're in the interview, you're like, oh my God, and then I took a career break because I was taking care of it. I get to the employers usually, the employer should be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But more importantly, what do you want to do now? What are your core skills and capabilities? What's your personality like, right? It's all forward looking. Like no one should be looking backwards on the resume that much. And so if you have a good reason, just say what it is and then move on to like the better part of the conversation, and don't be overly apologetic for it. Like you did what you had to do for yourself and for your family and just own it. Yeah. But then explain to the employer all the things that will matter in this role, which is like why you're the best fit and what you're going to be able to accomplish. Yeah, I totally resonate with that of your analogy, the pimple thing, because you're right. Like sometimes we overcompensate or we just kind of are our worst enemies, right? And I'm talking to, someone who's taken a bit of a career downshift as well. Like I have felt like I had to justify it, and I'm almost like apologizing before, anything needs to be done. And I think that that's really something that probably is not in your favor as well in an interview where you want to kind of put your best face forward. And so I love what you said about, owning it, telling, creating. I think it's important to kind of have a story around it. And like, if it's a longish kind of break, like what you've done in that, how you've grown, and and to show that you are still kind of in the game, right? And still connected to this role or industry that you're looking for. So I think that I like that out. Yeah. I mean, it's just like, I have interviewed moms returning after career break. I don't really blink an eye. I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Like took a break. That's fine. Welcome back to the workforce, and it's everything else. And then the other thing I would say to my early point about employers having to also meet employees at a higher bar. It's like, if the employer is really drilling in on the fact that you took a career break, don't join that company. Yeah. You probably won't like it either way. So like, it doesn't really matter, right? Like the interview process is as much for you to interview them as them to interview you. And you're also testing because like the fact that you're a mom isn't going away. So you need to be able to say like, do you actually have flexible work or is it lip service? And like ask them the hard questions too. Yeah. And don't take a job that you're not excited about. Right. So good. Thanks. Yeah, I think these are a great tips and like call outs. And I wish every employer or HR person like you, because sometimes these CVs don't even land on the hiring manager's table, right? Yeah. And I do think that's probably the hardest part about the job hunting process to begin with is like, I think we ultimately all know that the hiring managers have the final say, and recruiters end up being like sometimes a useful, sometimes a not so useful filtering function. Mm-hmm. And so I also think that it's like, to the extent that you can kind of circumvent the system, I would always advise people to do so, right? Like dropping the hiring manager a direct note on LinkedIn, like whatever it might be, thinking about creative ways to do it. Or, I mean, if it's like a social media or marketing manager role, it's like, hey, yeah, like I took a 2-year break, but I helped my friend with her company and we grew her Instagram account to like 1 million or like whatever. Like there's always ways to kind of showcase the value you've been doing. Yeah. Yeah, but good stuff. Can you talk a little bit about that trade-off that you've experienced, kind of prioritizing family in that sense and be here versus like growing your career? Yeah. So, right. So of course, everything has trade-offs, right? And so the biggest trade-off I feel like I've made in my career is I've moved away from San Francisco into Silicon Valley, which is like obviously the place to be if you're into tech and startups. And we went to Singapore. And again, in the beginning, it was just because we wanted to live abroad and have this like different life experience. And over time, I've stayed because it has just been so good on a personal level. I mean, and also for a career level, like I don't know if I could have moved into a C-level position as quickly as I would have in Silicon Valley as well. So I think, there were so many good reasons to stay. I would say though, over time, what I've noticed, and I talk about this with some of my expat friends, is like, the US I still do believe is like the fundamental like global nexus of the best talent, right? If you want to be the best of the best, you're in the US. And so like the US, the growth trajectory on an individual level, I think is just a little bit higher than what it is out in Singapore. And so like in the beginning, it was fine. But over time, I would say when I look at some of my peers in the US, I'm like, oh, wow, you guys have grown just because of the experiences and whatever. You've grown at a slightly higher rate. And so I feel like maybe on a skills level and definitely on a learning level, I'm like not atrophying, but like I'm just not at the same pace. And that gap has obviously gotten bigger as time has gone on. And so that... But you're still married. Yeah, exactly right. What is position? So that doesn't give me pause, I would say, right? I am kind of like, oh, that's maybe not great. And then probably 25-year-old me would be like, that's unacceptable. Like get yourself out of the slow lane and move back into the fast lane. With Harbor? Sorry, Stanford. I can't remember.
I went to Wharton. Yes. Yeah. I mean, yes, exactly. So my like super ambitious type A self would be like, "Oh, what are you doing? We don't take prisoners, blah, blah, blah. Like, get back." But obviously, older where I am now, I'm like, no, like I'm doing this because I have, like I said, I have like 5 different, buckets of my life that I think about, and I'm actually able to honor the last 3, whereas like, I wouldn't be able to otherwise. And yes, I'm still married and I'm in a happy marriage, right?
Great.
And the funny thing is, like, I do feel bad about it. I think it's real, but it's my trade-off and I'm willing to make it. And when I do, again, talk to friends in SF and they see, and they're like, man, I wish I had that. Like, and what I do remember actually is, so for a while I was at Apple and my husband was at Tesla. And so we're at like 2 of the, world's whatever, most innovative companies at the time. And we just kept being like, man, all we do is work. Like our lives feel really imbalanced. And I can only imagine if you stack parenthood on top of like what we were going through. All we wanted to do was be able to like have dinner together once in a while. And like, you know what I'm saying? And like,
the bar is so low.
Exactly. And like read a book or whatever. And so the fact that you have kids, I think just like amplifies that a little bit more. So that is my trade-off. I think that's one of my, it's not my only trade-off, but it's been one of the biggest trade-offs that I've made in terms of parenting out here in Singapore and working out here in Singapore versus staying in the Bay Area. But I am 100% at peace with this decision. Sorry. We do revisit it once in a while, right? Like, I'm like, okay, am I still good with this decision, this trade-off? And I'm like, okay, yes, we're good. And then,
I mean, just to encourage you, it's seasons, right? Like life is in seasons.
Yes.
Right now with young kids, like you just have sort of different priorities. And I mean, I'm sure at some point of time in your career, like this experience in Asia with, coming through acquisition and everything, like right now, perhaps it doesn't, it doesn't feel like it is at the same level as your peers back home, but I'm very sure that, looking at you as well, self agents, I'm sure it will, come to pass in a different season, right? So
like I said, I don't regret it.
Yeah.
But for me, like the way I get really comfortable with decisions is to analyze it from every single angle and be super, super clear about any trade-offs, any costs, any benefits, anything. And so I feel like as well informed as possible. And so, yeah, I've made my decision. I'm happy with it, but it is true. And to deny that there is a trade-off, I think would also be lying to myself.
Yeah.
Which I don't do.
Yeah. Great. So in this period of motherhood with kids under 5, like what is in running a busy company with intense roles, you and your husband, what's something that maybe you and your husband are figuring out for your family?
I think definitely, okay, on a micro level, it is where to spend that incremental hour, right? And so Emily Oster has a great concept about like, the reason that she's a working mom, which really resonates with me too, is like, the first like 3 hours of parenting is awesome, but then you're kind of like diminishing margins, right? And then same thing with working is like, you can work also for like 4 to 5 hours or whatever, but then there's diminishing margins. And so what's great about being a working mom is like, there's a little bit of balance of both. But then the point of the incremental hours, like say I have an extra hour, it's like, what do I do? Like, do I spend it with my kids? Do I do a little bit more work? Do I go see some friends? Do I hang out with my husband? Do I just take some solo time? And like I also have a lot of mom guilt. And so I'm usually like, I'm going to spend it with my kids. But sometimes that's not really the right decision. But I still to this day, I mean, I'm struggling with it now, is like, I don't feel good about taking that incremental hour for myself, no matter what shape or form. So that's what we're trying to, so that's on the micro level. On the macro level, I do think that our kids are still young. It's okay. I would say like maybe in the long run, we would have to question like, okay, do we stay in Singapore forever? And our kids are just born and raised in Singapore. Do we go back to the US? What do we do? Obviously our parents are getting older. Our siblings are having their kids and we want the cousins to be closer over time. So I do feel like we're not there yet, but I could foresee in like 3 to 5 years-ish, like that pull back to the US eventually, which it's in the future. So I shouldn't feel guilty. But then I'm like, man, what happens when I uproot my children from the only life they've ever known? And like I said, incredible community and schlep them halfway across the world. So I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you never know. So,
yeah.
We'll check in on you.
Yeah.
How that goes. And so working motherhood, what would you like your children to see or learn from you, and how you're navigating these two and trying to find, the integration?
Yeah. Okay. So as you know, I have a thing about extreme agency, which is like anybody can do anything at any point in time. Right. And I think people do get sometimes they feel
like trapped in certain situations, or they feel like they have to be in a certain location or be in a certain job just because of whatever, something that society told them, their parents told them, what they studied in school, like whatever, right? And so my whole thing is to like break through from any of that. And I hope my kids learn the same thing, right? Which is just like, you hear stories about like working moms who left the workforce and find it super difficult to return, working moms who, are unable to do industry switches or whatever, but like not just working moms, like anybody. And I want them to just know that like everything is possible at all times. And I've always tried to live my life this way. Like my industry, if you look at my resume, like I've jumped from supply chain and hardware at Apple to like media and marketing and events at Tech in Asia. And so I love it when people are always like, oh, so did you work in media before Tech in Asia? I'm like, nope. Like literally my first month on the job was just Googling like SEO and marketing and what's digital marketing and like whatever. I just didn't know any of these things. But my point is like, you can just, if you believe in yourself and have the confidence and you're reasonably smart and work hard, you can do it. And I want my kids to basically to feel the same level of agency in how they make their life choices, definitely their career decisions as well, but just like choosing for themselves and creating a life that they want and that they are happy with.
And there are small things that you do to, foster that kind of independence.
I'm an extremely lax parent. And so like, my husband's much more of like a rule follower. And so he will sometimes try to teach our kids to like do things or not do things because it's a rule, which has never worked with me because that's just not how I think. And so
how you brought up, because it doesn't sound very Asian.
No, so much. That's the funny thing. My parents are more traditionally Asian. I don't know why I came out. So like, yeah, exactly. But I would say my parents' approach did teach me discipline in hard times, right? And so I think there's a balance here. Yeah, definitely. Piano, violin, yes. Chinese school in the US, there was Chinese school every weekend. And so I was also learning Chinese. And so like, of course, as a kid. So my parents were good in that they gave me like the big structure. And there were some things that were like non-negotiables, right? Like you have to work hard, study hard, blah, blah, blah. But then within that framework, there was a lot of freedom. And I think I'm trying to craft a very similar environment for my kids. So I will never tell my kids to follow a rule just because, right? Like, because I say so, because that's not how I respond to the world around me or authority or whatever, but to think about why. And so I want them to be deeper, more critical thinkers. And if they decide that something's not for them, okay, maybe not now, like with the 18-month-old, he has no choice. But like as they get older, if they decide something's not for them and can actually articulate a good reason, I would support that. Yeah.
Ooh, that's great.
Yeah.
I heard about this earlier. What is an advice that you would tell your younger self, the Maria, before kids?
Yeah. A few things. One is, definitely take your full maternity leave.
Do you not?
I didn't. I think the first time was like 2 months and the second time was like 2.5 months. So I always felt this pull back to the company because I was like, oh no, they need me for blah, blah, blah. And I just feel like in the long run, whatever that project was just is not as important as spending like the first few months really at home recuperating and with your kid and just that like the valuable time. And so the first time I was like, wow, 2 months was really short. I must take a longer time. And the second time was like just under 3. And I was like, great, I've added 3 weeks to my maternity leave. So yes, so take the time for yourself. Don't apologize for it. Whatever it is that you feel like work is pulling you back for, I guarantee you in the long run, you will not remember that project, but you will value that time you had with your kid. So I think that's one. The second one is honestly, this is so dumb to say, but I didn't realize how amazing motherhood is and parenthood is. Like I used to look at working moms and be like, oh no, like that sucks that they have to like take care of their kids when they could be working. And then you become a working parent. You're like, no, it's the opposite. It's like, it sucks that you have to work when you actually should be parenting. And it's not because you have to, it's because you want to, right? Like I really don't think I appreciated how awesome it is being a mom and how much I would like it and how much how much more respect I have for people who definitely balance it all. But then I also used to never understand people who took career breaks. So I'm like, aren't you bored? Or like, don't you miss working? And the answer is like, no, like spending time with my kid is way better than like sitting in another like boring meeting, And so it's okay. I think this is something that you literally do not know. You cannot know until you actually go through it yourself. But yeah, like being a mom is amazing. It is the best thing ever. And then you reorient your entire life to make sure that you can actually be there for your kids and be there with your kids as opposed to the other way around. I used to think having kids was an inconvenience to your career, you know what I'm saying? And now I view it as like the opposite.
Yeah. I know. You sound like a recovering, workaholic.
I'm still a workaholic. I work like pretty intense hours because that's a very real part of me.
But mother has tapped into like an entirely different part of me. And it's just really about the balance now.
All right, finish your question, Maria. Can you have it all?
Yes, I do think you can have it all. But I think the caveat on that one is I think your definition of all will change, right? So again, like what 25-year-old me thought having it all meant looks very different than what 37-year-old me now thinks having it all means. And so in my opinion, I've like, okay, I wouldn't say I have it all right now, but I have more or less like what I want. And I'm continuously working on like whatever, having it all. But like, it's just your definition of what having it all changes. And then you work towards your current definition. And that's the best thing anybody can do. And I do think like the traditional concept of having it all. I also remember like back in the day when Sheryl Sandberg came out with Lean In, and then there was Anne-Marie Slaughter, I think. And then there was like these different camps of like, do you put pressure on the woman? Do you put pressure on the workplace? And like, what does having it all mean? And I was, again, reading all of this before having kids. And so I didn't even really know what I was like. I didn't know what I didn't know at the point in time. But having it all to me originally looked like, you know, working mom, traveling around the world, always like perfectly attired, you know, have their shit together 100%, comes home, kisses the kid, you know, like whatever. And like, you could still have that. But now knowing what I know, it's like, okay, that mom makes sacrifices too, right? Like her trade-off is that she's not at home that much with the kids. And that is her choice to make. And I respect that, right? Versus like the mom who has taken a career break, it's like her choice is that she will be at home. But then her trade-off is obviously not having like fulfilling some other part of herself. And so like life is just a series of trade-offs. And, you know, the trade-offs that you think are justified versus trade-offs that somebody else would thinks are justified is always going to be different. It's as different as personality. And so just you can have everything that you want, but you have to also you have to be willing to accept the trade-offs that get you there, right? And then so don't get too like, I mean, I just, again, like LinkedIn and Instagram, it's so unhealthy because it looks like people have it all, but you also have to respect the trade-offs that have gone into getting there. It's like the mom who has, I don't know, a 6-pack like 3 weeks after birth or whatever. And you're like, well, do you know what she invested to get there? Like you could have that too if you were willing to make the trade. Maybe. Awesome. I mean, like, I don't know, yeah, but like, but that's my point is, yeah, it's like create your own definition of what having it all means and then orient your life towards that. Don't sweat other people's definition of having it all. And definitely don't fall for perceived perceptions of other people who look like they have it all because there's always trade-offs. Everybody has to make trade-offs. And, you know, like if you were willing to make the same trade-offs, maybe that's what you would also, but if you're not, then don't worry about it. Like that wasn't your path to begin with and don't sweat it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the beautiful thing about motherhood is that it is a natural forcing function to make you prioritize like more ruthlessly, right? What is important for you as a person, your values, and how you want to really spend your time. And I've definitely, you know, I'm thankful for that how it has forced me to have to really evaluate because it's easy to just kind of go with the flow, like, yeah, you know, climb or however, you know, what floats your boat. So yeah, thank you. That's for, sharing your thoughts, your story, and some really good advice there. Thank you so much, Maria. This has been wonderful, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Make It Work, where we uncover inspiring stories of modern working mamas in Asia who have redefined their careers whilst putting family first. Please help others discover the show by leaving a review and rating on wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube, and TikTok. Meanwhile, here's to you, making it work.